Happy November! Sorry about that, guys. For some reason, my software wasn't connecting with my camera, even though it was showing it to me. It wasn't showing it to you. So, I can't believe it's November already. Like, I legit feel like we just started October. So while I make sure that this is going into the posse as well, and that I can see my comments, let me know, how was everyone's Halloween last night? Did you get some good candy? I sure did. Or my kids sure did. I gave them life. They give me my Reese's. They're Reese's. That's how this works. Okay. I think we're finally rocking and rolling. Just want to make sure. Oh, Facebook, you're so slow. Just want to make sure that this is also going into the posse, because I try and make sure that you guys get it in 2 places at once, but there's nothing that makes it go and do that automatically. So if you're watching, say hi. Let me know how your Halloween was yesterday. I loved all the cute kids yesterday in our daily thread there. It was so cute. Some of you guys are seriously clever. I love the one, there was one kid who was dressed like a crane operator or a bulldozer operator, I think it was. So cute. I had Conan O'Brien show up at my door. I thought that was pretty clever. So we're going to jump in here in just a second, guys. I'm just trying to get this into the parenting posse. Oh, Facebook is going so slow. Oh my goodness. Okay. I think we're good. I think we're rocking and rolling now. Okay. So I hope you're sitting down to eat some candy right now, because nothing goes better with candy than early childhood theory. And so, as I said, we're continuing our series on early childhood theorists tonight, and tonight we're diving into Jean Piaget. We've already talked about Montessori and Vygotsky, so if you missed those, you can scroll back in the timeline or click on the video tab and watch those. But do that later, because I've got a lot to share with you tonight. This series is meant to be kind of your mini degree in early childhood theory, because if every parent understood early childhood development, parenting would be so much easier. But most parents don't have a degree in early childhood development. Lucky for you, though, I do. So for those of you who are new around here, my name is Allana Robinson, and I'm a parenting effectiveness coach and child behavior strategist, and I help parents just like you of infants, toddlers, and preschoolers implement non-punitive, child-centered, developmentally appropriate behavior management in their homes with their families so that you can raise confident, competent, well-behaved kids. I do one-to-one coaching. I have a course called the Brain Skills Play Blueprint, and I host my free peer support Facebook group, The Parenting Posse. Okay, so hold on to your hats, ladies and gents. Here we go. Jean Piaget. Let's start with the dates. So he was born in 1896 in Switzerland. In 1919, he took a job at the Alfred Binet Laboratory School in Paris to try and standardize a British intelligence test for French use. So that is where he noticed that the children were all answering the questions in a really similar way, and he wanted to figure out why. So he passed away in 1980 at the age of 84. That's the Wikipedia version. So a lot of people call Piaget a psychologist, but he wasn't really. He was an epistemologist. So epistemology is the study of what differentiates justified belief from opinion. Or in other words, how knowledge is made. So while other people were asking what kids know, Piaget was concerned with how they know it. And there's been a lot of talk in early childhood development circles of late about how valid Piaget still is, given that a lot of his theories have been not disproven so much, but they have to be adjusted for modern knowledge, which I quite frankly think is ridiculous. All of the theorists theorists, that's not the word, all of the theorists we're talking about should have to be adjusted for modern knowledge. Have you been paying attention to death dates? So we've learned more about early childhood development in the last 20 years than we have in the history of mankind to date. They weren't psychics, they were theorists, but they were foundational in how we've gone forward learning about children. So yes, he's absolutely still important. So in contrast to Vygotsky, who, if you remember, believed that children learn from the more knowledgeable other, like from their interactions with people, both children and adults, Piaget believed that children learn primarily from their environment, so like Montessori. And like Montessori, he bought into the idea that children learn best when they're doing the work versus being given explanations by adults. So both Piaget and Montessori believed that children should be given every possible opportunity to do it by themselves and for themselves. He thought that parents and teachers should be sparking curiosity in children rather than giving direct instruction. So our job, in his eyes, is to support our children in their search for answers, which obviously means that he was also a big fan of play. He saw play as a safe way for children to experiment with trial and error. And as I said, he was a big believer in the environment being the main teacher. So well-stocked playrooms filled with intentional items to spark curiosity, those were his jam. So at the center of Piaget's theories were his stages of cognitive development. So he believed that there were 4 stages that kids went through from birth to age 18. The first is the sensory motor stage, which he believed was from birth to age 2-ish. Next comes the preoperational stage, which is age 2-ish to 7-ish. And yes, there's overlap. He knew kids don't level up, they're not robots. After preoperational comes concrete operational from 7-ish to 11, 12-ish. And then formal operational, which is 11 plus-ish. So since I focus more on infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, we're going to focus on sensory motor and pre-operational tonight. So say hi, guys. There are people watching me. Say hello. So sensory motor is exactly what it sounds like. The focus is on sensory experiences and motor development. So pretty much exactly what a baby does. He believed that babies build intelligence by honing reflexes into purposeful movement. I have my throat hurts, but I don't well, it hurts, but it's kind of all phlegmy. So that's why I'm mixing up a whole bunch of words today, because my throat and my tongue don't seem to be able to keep up with my brain. Okay. So he believed that babies build intelligence by honing reflexes into purposeful movement. So, for instance, if a baby's laying on the ground and they have one of those rattles that's like an anklet or a bracelet that goes around their ankle, if they have just one, so one on one leg and none on the other. So at first, baby would just kick, 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 kick. Eventually, baby's going to stop kicking the leg without the rattle and purposefully start kicking just the leg with the rattle, right? Because they can hear that it's happening with this leg, but not that one. So that's the sensory part. If the next time you do it, you swap legs, you'll notice that the baby starts by kicking the leg that had the rattle, and until they figure out that where that sound is coming from, there's the sensory part again. And then they stop kicking this leg and start just kicking the leg with the rattle. So also in this stage is, and that's where before I go on, so that's where he's now they've built intelligence, right? That started as a reflex, and then they started to do it purposefully. So that's the roots of intelligence. So also in this stage is the advent of object permanence. And if you're a parent, you've probably heard that term before. Object permanence is when a baby starts to realize that things exist even if they can't see them. So before object permanence sets in, which is around 6-7 months, if you cover a toy your child was just actively playing with, they'll act like it's just disappeared into the ether. Hey, Rachel! Thank you for joining me tonight. It's lovely to see you here, girl. Yeah, so if you cover a toy that they were just playing with, they're going to act like it's like disappeared into the ether. They won't make any move to move the blanket because if it's out of sight, it is literally gone as far as they're concerned. So once object permanence sets in, if you cover the toy with a blanket, they're going to reach under the blanket. So this is why peekaboo is so much fun with babies, because it's playing with object permanence. The dark side of object permanence is, of course, separation anxiety, because now they know that when you're gone, you're out there somewhere without them. How dare you leave me behind? So Piaget's solution for this is for infants to be cared for in what he called a safe and interesting environment. So basically, distract them by playing into their development. Have space for them to use those senses and those burgeoning motor skills so that they can focus on that instead of the fact that you're out there without them. So have any of you experienced those things with your own infants? Pop it in the comments. Personally, I think that he pretty much nailed that first stage because it's pretty basic, right? That's what babies do. They move until they figure out how to move better and how movement can serve them. That's sensory motor. So next is the pre-operational stage, which, if you remember, is from 2-ish to 7-ish. So this is mainly where I hang out. I wager a guess that most of the parents in the parenting posse have kids in this age range, which, yeah, most of them have kids in this age range. This is when kids think the most differently from adults, which is why so many of us have such a hard time parenting through this stage, because our kids are thinking the least like us. The main feature of the pre-operational stage is egocentrism, or self-centeredness. They can only see the world from their perspective in this stage. They're also extremely bad multitaskers, so they can only focus on one thing at a time and one aspect of one thing at a time. So that means that they're very literal in their understanding. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. They also rely heavily on their lived experience versus instruction. So they need to try something out and do it themselves. If you just tell them about it, they're not going to believe you. And they tend to overgeneralize. So once they figure out that something works in one situation, they then think it's going to work in every single situation. So one thing that I'd like to clear up, because it's something that I hear a lot, is parents mistaking egocentrism as uncaring. So when I say that they're self-centered, I don't mean that in a sense that they don't care that you have a different perspective from them. They honestly don't know you do. They're so focused on their own world view, they literally don't even know that you have a different one. So the best example of egocentrism is that it's like a bad game of word association. This often, if you ever done word association, it often gets played like in team building exercises where someone starts by saying a random word and then you go around the table saying a different word that the word that was said by the person just previous to you made you think of. So for instance, the first person would say sky, and the next person might say blue, and then the next person might say water, and then the next person might say pool, etc., etc., etc. So instead, imagine that you're doing this with preschoolers. And I'm sure we've all witnessed this in preschool programs, like when there's a group of young kids. The adult in charge says, the sky is blue. And then all the kids immediately start going, I have blue socks. My grandpa's socks smell funny. I smelled flowers with my mom in the garden last week. My mom says that if I keep unbuckling my car seat, I won't get to go to Nana's house. My car seat is pink. Pink birds are called flamingos. And it just kind of spirals down from there. Right? They're so egocentric. They hear something and it sparks a thought in their head based on their experiences. And then they have to let it out because they know something about what you just said. A very small part of what you just said, but something nonetheless. They're not connecting with what each of their peers has said and are engaging in a joint conversation. They're starting their own conversation from a place of strength because they have something to say about something that they heard, right? All it takes is one word. They're just simply triggering thoughts in each other. This is also why kids this age take adults very literally. So I asked my son to be a doll and grab me some socks the other day. And he was like, Mama, I'm not a doll, I'm Logan. Yes, thank you. Right? He totally took what I was saying and he thought that I was literally telling him to be a doll. So children are very, very bad at taking that kind of instruction and understanding it as expression. So not a child example, but those of you who have seen that recent article that went around about the man bringing his toddler daughter into the house, sleeping in her car seat, and he brought her into the house with the car seat and put her in the bed in the car seat because her mother said, oh, just put her in bed when he asked her what to do because she was sleeping in the car. Same idea. I thought that was hilarious. So another feature of pre-operational is that children form their ideas directly from their own experiences, right? That's why that kind of really bad game of telephone is happening, because they're hearing one word, one thought, a part of one thought that relates to their experience, and then they're like, oh, I know something about that, right? So they don't care about your experiences that you're telling them about. Theirs, right? They have to experience it. So, for example, from my early intervention days, a little girl that I worked with lived on a farm. And one day we were out playing and her grandfather came out. Yeah, her grandfather came over to chat with me and say hi to her, and unbeknownst to me, her cousin was up on the roof of the barn that we were standing beside, and he was fixing a shingle. And right at the moment where he fired his nail gun, Grandpa sneezed. Like a huge grandfather sneeze, right? Like, you know the kind, you can hear it from like miles away. So to her, loud bangs made Grandpa sneeze because she'd experienced that. Remember I said they overgeneralize, right? They have one experience and they think it applies to everything. So this is what Piaget calls disequilibrium. When a child has an experience and then they believe that there's a cause-effect relationship there where there isn't one. So then a few months later, they were at Canada Day festivities and there were fireworks, but Grandpa wasn't sneezing. And her mother later told me that she was so confused and she actually worked herself up into like quite a state of distress because there were bangs and Grandpa wasn't sneezing. And it took months for her to come off of this belief. But she had multiple experiences in that time, mostly engineered by like her parents and I, that disproved that what she'd believed to be true. So we would like purposefully like bang things when her grandfather was around to show her that banging doesn't make grandpa sneeze. And we would purposefully make grandpa sneeze by like blowing flour in his face and spraying perfume in his face and, you know, doing all sorts of stuff that did make him sneeze, so that she could see that grandpa is not sneezing because of the bangs. He's sneezing because his nose is irritated. So, you know, that association of grandpa sneezing is not caused by loud noises. But it took so much more for her to disprove that theory than for her to make it in the first place. And it took a long time, but she did finally get it. There was no talking her out of it before. Like, she was dead certain of herself. So that process where a child adapts their hypothesis due to new information is called what Piaget called accommodation. And accommodation puts children back into equilibrium. So preoperational children tend to rely heavily on their sight as well. So they make odd associations based on that. Like, if you're taller, you're older, right? Lots of kids believe that. If you're short, you're young. Because again, from their perspective, dealing mainly with adults and children, that's true. They've had lots of experiences to back that up. Then you get to a point, or you have an experience like when you have a grandma who's in her 90s and she's all like shrunken and hunched over and barely clears 5 feet, and daddy who's 6 feet whatever, and they'll think daddy is older than grandma simply because he's taller. Or they'll associate heavy with big, and their minds are totally blown when they like pick up a beach ball and it's light as air because beach balls are big, right? The really bad multitaskers, they can only focus on one attribute of something at a time. So using the example of grandma and daddy, they're focused on size because it's what they can easily see. It's up to us to draw their attention to the other attributes, the other factors. You know, grandma has wrinkles, she has white hair, her nails are all yellow, she has a hard time standing without a walker or a cane, she doesn't drive. Daddy has, very few wrinkles, his hair has color, his nails look like mine, he can drive and run and jump. Oh, grandma's old. It's not just about who's taller. So Piaget's theory states that it's more effective to ask them questions to provoke them to work their way through the puzzle instead of just telling them grandma's older than daddy, because they rely on their experiences. So they're not going to believe you. They need to construct that knowledge themselves from the ground up. They have to figure it out, or else it's not real to them. Okay, I know that was a lot. We're getting to the end here. Stick with me. There are 3 things that are important to keep in mind, according to Piaget, for parents of preoperational children. 1 is lots of free time. Lots of time to play uninterrupted and really get deep into themselves to figure things out. He really agrees with Montessori in that he too thought that the worst thing that you can do is interrupt an engaged child, and it should be like an absolute last resort. Watch them, don't bug them. The second thing is, whenever possible, allow them to really experience things. Don't teach them about farm animals and, take out those little plastic play figurines and, take out the book and never visit a farm. Take them to the farm, have them see and touch and smell the animals, see a milking demonstration, feed the animals, take them to a subdivision that's being built and watch the builders doing their thing from a safe distance. Go home and show them the studs in your house and the wires that carry electricity, and see what kind of effect that has on their play and on their block structures. Don't tell them, do. And 3, plan very open-ended activities and ask them very open-ended questions. Open-ended means that neither you nor the child knows how it's going to end up. The focus is on the process, not the product. And if you're familiar with my logical consequence process, you can now see why I call it a process and why it works so well. It's completely open-ended. It allows children to think critically and construct their own knowledge rather than have it dictated to them. Very open-ended questions ask children to think. Open-ended experiences ask children to think. So that's why I love Piaget, because he really believes in asking children to think. Okay, so that's the Coles Notes on Piaget. I hope that all of this is starting to come together for you guys, and you're starting to see how none of these theorists are wrong. None of them are 100% right. They're all just pieces of the puzzle. And they can all be right at different times. So if you're wanting to, some help with how to guide your children to construct their own knowledge, and you haven't yet, I strongly urge you to download my free scripts to manage the top 10 crazy-making behaviors. Each one is a script. Most of them are open-ended. I'm pretty sure that they all are. But I'm not going to say all because I can't quite remember, so I'm going to say most. Most of them are open-ended, and they address one of 10 behaviors that my Facebook group, the Parenting Posse, told me were the toddler and preschool behaviors that were the most infuriating for them. They're informed by my 10 years of working with young children, and they've got elements of Vygotsky, they've got elements of Montessori, they've got elements of Piaget, and so much more. So go grab them. The link for them is up in the description of this video. Next week, we'll be back to our normal Tuesday 9 p.m. Eastern slot, and I'm thinking that we're going to move on to Dewey. I know everybody's really jonesing for like Magda Gerber and Loris Malaguzzi and, all of those more contemporary ones, but they're so much more recent, and I want to get through like Dewey and Erickson and Bandura and Bronfenbrenner first, because they're a lot more earlier and a lot more foundational. So, does anybody have any questions about Piaget? I'm happy to answer them. Sorry about stumbling all over my words tonight, guys. I'm really got a frog in my throat. I sound kind of weird too. It's driving me kind of crazy. Okay, so if nobody has any questions, that's it for tonight. And I will see you next Tuesday. Good night.